Ryan, I'll never forget your name because my brother's name is Ryan, so it's easy. It's easy. We're at the Drug Recognition and Enforcement Conference here in Toronto, and it's been running. This is day 2.
Yeah.
But we chatted briefly yesterday and made plans to podcast.
Sure.
So that's awesome. Ryan, tell me what you do. Tell me about because you're here not as an on-duty police officer,
right?
But you're talking about some stuff and things that are important to police.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not here representing my agency. I am a full-time law enforcement officer in Missouri. I work the highways, wear a round hat, Sam Brown, and talk with a knife hand, if that kind of tells you probably who I work for, because I'm not kind of supposed to go into that. But so all this stuff is off-duty, and the reason I've kind of, from what I'm aware, been brought up here is to talk about several things that are issues in law enforcement, and a lot of those are being morale, retention, and then what's causing officers to leave this profession, and then how can we attract new officers to come in and then keep those officers over a longer period of time. Now, yesterday I also talked a little bit about marijuana because that's kind of a hot topic. I do enjoy talking about marijuana, but the leadership aspect and the officer morale retention is very personal to me, so
Sure.
I like this one a little bit better.
So you're talking about marijuana, and here in Ontario or in Canada, marijuana is permitted, consumption is legal, possession is legal up to a certain amount. I assume that's not the case in Missouri, or is it?
It is. So we just we legalized medicinally in 2018, so December of 2018. So you could only have it for medicinal purposes, but we just went full recreational in December of last year. So we're essentially the same that y'all have. Our cannabis industry is a little bit different. It's all private. It's monitored by the state, so they issue licenses and everything. But the dispensaries, the cultivation facilities, the labs, everything is private industry. One of the issues that we had when we legalized was there was no funding written into, so we have a constitutional amendment through our state, so it's their constitutional right to purchase, possess, and use marijuana. But there was no funding written into the constitutional amendment that would go to law enforcement and then teach us about marijuana.
That's a problem.
So yes, it is. So the reason I really started Extracte-ED, which is my secondary employment, has slowly kind of blossomed into my primary one, to be honest with you now, is because I knew that we needed that training, and I would probably have a lot of red tape if I tried to go through the government side of things, so I kind of went private, and I have a lot more freedom to educate and things to say, and here I am in Canada teaching about marijuana too, so it's worked out quite well.
Awesome. And although you've got the change in Missouri law, federally it's still illegal. Because there's problems when people are driving into the States and suddenly being, kicked out and told not to come back.
Yeah, sure. So that's what's really weird for us is, so federally it's illegal, so the federal government will actually still take action on certain amounts of marijuana. Now, of course, smaller amounts, possession, use, they don't really take action on it, but if you introduce like a firearm in marijuana, then the federal government will step in. Okay. But they basically leave what they call lower localized activity to the lower level localized law enforcement, like myself, who works for the state. But once it's legalized in that state, I have no authority to enforce anything, if that kind of makes sense. So where I'm from, it's very gray. It's legal, but it's illegal at the same time.
I like gray. Gray is interesting.
Gray is where we live at. Yeah, gray is where we live.
But let's talk about something, because I've been talking about drugs for 2 days. I'm really interested in what your take is on your other topic, the one you're speaking about today, which is all about the recruiting and retention and the job.
Yeah, that's, again, very personal to me because I've seen several of, I'm going to say my friends who are very good cops leave either the profession in general or move on to another agency. And to see these guys who were what I would classify as peak performers or top performers who are leading the agency and not only arrest, because that's not the only thing that's important, right? Community relations, change in tires, little things like that are also important. But guys that do this and go out of their way to make sure these things happen, we're getting out of law enforcement. So the big question is why? And I think when you look at law enforcement, all we talk about, for the most part, is recruiting. So the question is, well, how can we bring more people in? So I think we're asking the wrong question. And it's not how can we bring more people in, the question is how can we keep the people that we have? And there's several different ways to do that. So the presentation I'm going to give today is going to talk about that. But it's really simple to do. Now, I didn't say it's easy. I said it's simple, two different things, right? But a lot of things really come back to leadership. And I want to make it clear when I say leadership, I'm not talking about administration, because sometimes we link those
They get
together.
conflated, yeah.
Right? So leadership can happen really on any level. So whether it's a road officer, whether it's what we would call a corporal, so the next person up, sergeant, lieutenant, whatever. And it's about those individuals valuing the people that we have and taking care of the people that we have. So essentially, I say that's stopping the bleeding. So first we got to plug the hole before we can put more blood into the body, if you will. So once we value our people and take care of them and back them, I think we will see that the people leaving will either slow or come to a stop maybe, and then we can worry about replacing the open positions that we have. But right now, we're losing people in buckets and refilling it in drops, and it's just not working.
It's interesting. I think there are some fundamental differences in the way the organizations in the United States versus Canada are run. We tend to get people that don't leave. They just stop working at a capacity that makes it feel like they're there.
Okay.
And that is because they're all hanging in for the pension, right? They're here. They can't necessarily find somewhere to make the money that they make in the industry that they've chosen. But it doesn't feel nice anymore, so they're just checked out, and they'll do the minimum that they have to do until they can actually formally retire and get paid, as opposed to quitting and just taking off somewhere else. And there's obviously people who transition between different organizations or services, but I think there's a big problem with that because it's hard to replace what we get done, and we're a 30-year, 35-year kind of stretch.
Okay.
Because we factor out differently. Are you 20 and out? Is that your...
So 20 and out was before me.
Okay.
My retirement date isn't until December 1 of 2042.
Holy moly.
Now, with some strategic financial planning, I will probably go a little bit sooner than that. Not that I don't love the job, but I think I'm able to do things for officers outside of like what I'm doing now more compared to what I can do for them there.
Yeah.
Now, again, I love the job, and there's a reason that I'm still doing it. But it's interesting what you said about guys basically working but not doing anything. So we call that ROD, which is retired on duty.
Oh, I like that.
Right? So they're there, they're taking up a spot, but we can't refill them with what we call a blue flame, or a new person's going to come in and do some work. So I think the question is, why are they not doing anything? Okay. So if we kind of backtrack and look at that person's career, whether it's 20, 30 years, what has happened to them over that 20, 30 year time span that has caused them to go from being proactive or committed to serving other people to now the only thing I want to do is preserve myself. And I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I'm betting if we went back and looked at some things that occurred, there was probably some times where they felt misrepresented, and I'm putting that very nicely, or maybe not supported. So now they've withdrawn and went into preservation mode. So now I just got to last long enough to get a retirement. So we got to start looking at those things, because you have guys that, and I'm sure it's the same here, that have been on 30 years and are still killing it. We have those guys that are still leading the state with 20 plus years on the road. So how do we take what those people are doing and replicate that over and over again versus let's just replace the guys as they leave? And so I think we're just asking ourselves the wrong questions.
I think it's very interesting, and obviously we've had similar experiences in terms of seeing those kind of characters, the archetypes, right? All the different types of characters. They're in every service everywhere, and it's fascinating to see how that. 'Cause every service has, or every shift has that guy.
Sure.
So I like what you're saying though about the that hiring is, or the question is different. Like how do you hire someone versus how do you to fill a spot versus how do you retain people? The focus is totally different. When we hire, when we choose a dog for canine, there's a very specific dog we're looking for.
Sure.
I don't know if we do that when it comes to coppers.
I don't think we do. If you look at our recruiting efforts, and again, I'm not real familiar with the way Canada Police recruits. I would say it's very familiar with the way that we do it. And recruiting is, and I'm not bashing recruiters, right? Everybody has a job to do. But if you look at recruiters, and we kind of talked about this offline, we're trying to sell people a product. And that's not what cop work is. And not to be corny here, but cop work is a calling. It's people that believe in something bigger than themselves. Mm-hmm. It's people that believe in, I can sacrifice myself for the service of others. And that's something you can't sell to people. And I'm going to steal some lines from some of my good friends. They say it's like selling someone a purple tie when they really want a red one. Well, when they get that purple tie, it may hold them over for 1 to 3 years, which is where we see retention of officers really start to the resignation of officers really starting to pick up after that 1 to 3 year time period, because they wanted a red tie and we sold them a purple one. So finally, they want what they were sold, or what they want the red tie, and decide to leave and go get that. When we're not selling them a product, right? We're giving them a career and the opportunity to be something bigger than themselves. And I just don't think we are always spreading that message or looking for the right dog, if you will. So I think we just need to maybe shift that style a little bit.
Sure. You want to find the people with the right traits that are going to be there
Sure.
for the right reasons. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I started out as a volunteer, as an auxiliary officer. I had so much fun. I became a court officer, and I worked in the courts and in prisoner transportation and all that. And it took me 12 years, I think, until I actually transitioned to police officer. But I'm getting paid to do stuff now that I did for free then.
Yeah.
So it's really hard not to keep motivated when I'm so happy with every day, because
Yeah.
every day is a blessing. But there are people who are angry every day, and that is not okay either.
Yeah.
For them or us.
Yeah, I agree. Something I wanted to mention about recruiting is I was never recruited. Now, formally, so I never met with a recruiter who said, "Oh, here's this job." But what we see is our best recruiters are happy employees. So not people we go, "Hey, go to this division and try to sell a product." It's the people who are happy at what they do. So the way that I got into law enforcement is I was actually stopped for speeding. And I just got done deer hunting. So I was like a hippie when I was younger. So I had long hair, I had deer blood all over me. And I thought, oh my God, I was doing 20 over. So this trooper stops me, talks to me, gives me the ticket. So once I got the ticket, I said, hey, now that this is done, I'm very interested in what you do. How do I become that? Because the way this guy carried himself, the way he talked to me could have been way different. So that guy sold me a product without saying a single word. In fact, I reached out to him.
He was an ambassador.
100%.
He was an influencer.
Yes.
And no different than someone on TikTok today. He through his own action and persona made you interested. And that's the way to do it.
Absolutely. It wasn't a guy coming in, at a table going, "Oh, come work for us. Here's our benefits." It was showing me everyday police work, even though I was the violator, or you could say criminal at that point, treating me like a human being and passing that on to me, going, boy, I would like to do what this guy is doing. Again, never thought about copping. I was going to school to be a teacher, right? And I get stopped and I'm like, I think I would like to do that, simply based on my interaction with a guy who enjoyed his job.
Yeah.
Now, the really cool thing about this guy gives me his card, and I take off. A few years later, I end up getting hired by that same agency. I'm stationed in what we would call zone, so the county next to him. And I still have his card to this day. And I went to him and I said, hey, you don't remember me. It's been 4 or 5, well, at that point, probably 8 years.
Wow.
And I said, but I was truthful when I said I'm interested. And he didn't remember me, of course, but it was neat to now work beside him.
So it's funny you say that. I was really impressed with the interactions of school resource officers. Mm-hmm. So when I was in high school, there were a couple of coppers who worked in my high school, and I became friendly with them, and I looked up to them, and I was just so impressed with what they were doing. And later on, I become a police officer. I become a member of the Blue Knights motorcycle organization, and I meet that officer who, oddly enough, owns the same motorcycle that I do.
Sure.
I lost touch with him, and he says, "Oh no, did I do this?" He says, "Please tell me I'm not responsible."
Yeah.
But it's amazing how good people.
Sure.
It's contagious.
Right.
Goodness is contagious. A true passion for what you do is contagious, and the opposite is also true. If you have really negative influences, that can spread like cancer.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to talk about today is toxic workers and toxicity in a culture. And a lot of times I'm going to reference corporate cultures. In law enforcement, we like to say, well, we're not a business. Okay, well, maybe we should start running things similar to a business, or at least treating our people the same, because what we see is overwhelmingly private industry is a lot more successful than government industries. And I think a lot of it is private industry can fail. Government's not necessarily, because we always have the revenue, so we don't have to treat people well. So I think we need to start replicating these businesses or corporate cultures that have the opportunity to fail, but don't because of the way they treat their folks. So again, that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. And toxic, a lot of people turn toxic, which are the people that are mad no matter what, right? Heck, we just got a big raise, or a pretty decent raise, and guys were going, it's not big enough. What are you talking about, man? I'll take a 2% raise. It doesn't matter what it is. So what we see is those toxic workers, and there's research out there, and I'll cite that today, but often spread that toxicity to other people. So when you have one person who's what we would call the negative Nancy, the world's ending, right? They also influence 2 or 3 other people. And then those 2 or 3 other people now go to different shifts, and now they're the negative Nancys, and everything's just the end of the world for them. And that's easy to replicate, right? Because it does it naturally. What we need to be taking is the guys and gals who are out there killing it every day and replicate that and put them in a position to spread the word and recruit, if you will, because they're happy at what they do.
So it's not just recruiting to get you on the job, it's sort of constantly recruiting the positive attitude and maintaining that informal leadership of, hey, this is still the best place on earth because it's the best place on earth.
Yeah.
Because I certainly live and breathe that. I think what we're doing is fantastic. And I love the fact that we get to be, we get to help people and we get paid to do it. Like it's just the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. We get paid to look cool, drive somebody else's car, and carry a gun. What else? You know what I'm saying?
What else is there?
A lot of people would pay money to do that. So why are we unhappy? And again, that's the big question as to why are we unhappy. And I just think we really need to break that down and maybe talk to some of these folks. But a lot of times we keep those folks at arm's length because we don't want to address the true problem.
Yeah.
And maybe you see this, maybe you don't. But a lot of the reasons we don't address the real problem is because it makes us feel uncomfortable. I'm going to tell you today, there are going to be some people very uncomfortable in this room that I'm going to talk to. It's uncomfortable for me. But if we don't get in that mindset of how do we fix this problem, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. So we've got to get out of that mindset and switch over.
What do you think about the 80-20 rule about management?
Like the Pareto's Principle is what you're talking about?
It may be. I don't know. Is this where management spends 80% of their time dealing with 20% of their...
Yeah. So essentially that's the Pareto Principle, and I'm going to talk about that today too. So, the question is, so there's roughly 920,000 cops in the U.S., somewhere in there, right? Counting the feds. Not sure those are really countable, but but they're in there. Just kidding. I have friends that are in the Fed. So the question is, can we change the mindset of 920,000 people? The answer is no. But what can we do is we can change the mindset of the 20% who are toxic. So Pareto's Principle is basically 20% of the folks are responsible for either 80% of your success or 80% of your consequences. So if we can focus on that 20% that are responsible for the 80% of success, that's how we push recruiting without ever having a single recruiter. But we also need to be mindful of the 20% who are the toxic workers. Now, the big question is, how do you address the toxicity in a culture? Well, that varies agency to agency. What does your policy allow for? Do they need removed from their position? Now, I don't mean removed as in fired. Right, I mean removed as in, do they need to go to a different division? Do they need this? Do they need that? Right now I'm in our training division. I still work the road, by the way, because number one, I love it. Number two, there's a pretty big disconnect between trainers and road guys sometimes, and I refuse to be that type of trainer. But we just need to look at different ways to manage those types of people. Now, there's a difference between managers and leaders too, which is a whole nother topic, right? But I'm a firm believer in the Pareto Principle and what we can do to use that to change things, because it is a sound way to operate. Yeah.
Very cool. There's so much to talk about when it comes to this, because while we all think that we have this unique problem, it's not unique at all.
No, not at all. And the really neat thing about what I get to do on my side business or side gig here is I get to talk to cops from Maine to California. I mean, we go out and have some whiskey afterwards, and I think, cops are very open, right? They're going to tell you exactly what's
Especially
going on.
Especially if they've had whiskey.
100%, yeah. So I get to hear all these complaints. Well, guess what? It's the same. right? It's the same in Maine, Missouri, California, Texas, Wyoming, all these states that I've been to, we're all having the exact same problem. Guess what? Canada, you're no different. You're having the same issues that we are. Now, there's pros and cons to that. The cons are we're all doing something wrong. But the pro is we can all fix it the same way too if we can figure that out and get outside of this in-the-box thinking of we have to do it the same way every time. And we have this saying that it's the way we've always done it. I don't know if you guys say that. So sometimes we say, cops will ask, well, why do we do it this way? And the answer we get is, it's the way we've always done it. Okay, that way is currently not working anymore, so we've got to shift that into something that might work. And let's just say it doesn't work. We still got to try something different because we know the results of this outcome. We don't know the results of the next one.
It's like the pot roast story. Have you heard of the pot roast story?
I'm not sure if I'm familiar with the pot roast story.
This is where a mother is teaching daughter how to make pot roast, and she cuts the tips off, she puts it in, and she takes the tips of the pot roast and she puts it in a separate pan. And grandma's off in the corner. You heard about this?
Yes.
So mom's explaining to the daughter, this is how we do it. She says, well, that's the way I did it because I had a small pan.
Yes.
So we lose a lot of the reason we do things.
Sure.
And, like we call miters or radios or walkie-talkies miters because 30 years ago the company that made them was called Miter. And it's now the miter. We do so many things and we've lost the why. Yeah. It just has become part of our language. And it's great that we do it. It's a nice piece of history, but we should at least know why we're doing it. And a lot of the times that gets lost.
Yeah, and I think it not only gets lost, but a lot of times there's repercussions for asking why. And I think the reason a lot of folks get frustrated with us, specifically my generation, millennials, we're the why generation. We want to know why. But I think people get frustrated is because they don't know the answer to that question as to why do we fill out 3 forms to tow a car? And the answer is, well, we've always done it that way. Okay, that was cool for 1940. And that's what we needed then, but why are we still doing that? Why can't we rethink this process?
Yeah.
And for some reason, we just have yet to get out of that mindset that we have these abilities to change things. We can do it. There's no rules, right?
Hold on, you said the magic word, change. That's a crisis word. That triggers people.
Yeah, that's trigger. Oh yeah, that's a key word there for sure. But I just think we have to open our minds and understand that it's not working. It's really no one's fault, right? A lot of people are just scared to get outside of their comfort zone. And the big word where I'm from is liability. Oh, what about liability? What about liability? Here's the deal. Are you going to take care of your folks or not? And if you're not willing to step out of the box and take care of your folks, let somebody else step up and do that. Because that's what we need right now, because law enforcement, not just nationwide, worldwide, we're hurting real bad for leadership.
Well, we're hurt. Law enforcement is hurting everywhere in the world, from what I understand, and there's obviously a common problem if we're all experiencing it. When I joined 23 years ago, I was told the job is, well, we'll say messed up, and people speaking to recruits now are saying the job is messed up, not like when I joined. But, so if it was messed up, if it's messed up now, and it was messed up when I joined, it was messed up when the guy before me joined. It's always been messed up.
Sure.
Or it's always been whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we just describe it as the worst thing since sliced bread because it's not working the way we want it to.
Sure.
So I guess finding that sweet spot, getting the right people and addressing the issues that they're experiencing can really change the way that they experience their lives, their careers, and their own happiness within it.
100%. And I'm betting if we went back and looked at the issues when you started, and compare them to the issues that I have and compare them to the issues that we're going to have in 15 years, it's probably the same exact list. Now, one of the big things with that list is a lot of times ourselves isn't on it, right? Because in any sort of problem, we're always the common denominator.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to look internally first. What can I do different, number one? And then once I figure out how can I change things for the better, then we start looking beyond. But number one, again, myself, is who I need to change first.
Right.
Because when we change ourselves, that also spreads.
And there's power in that. You can control what you do and how you run your show.
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day I wake up, I control my attitude. I control my leadership abilities, right? I control how I'm going to respond to situations that happen to me. Hey, here's the deal. Sometimes you're just dealt a shit sandwich, right? And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to cuss on here or not, but you know what I'm saying? Sometimes you're dealt with one of those, and that's life, dude.
It is what it is.
Get over it. I've eaten plenty of them. I'll probably eat another one pretty soon. But what we need to know is, so's the guy down the road, right? This is not unique to me. It's not unique to you. And once we realize that sometime life just sucks, whoop-de-doo, man. Make tomorrow better than today.
There's good days, there's bad days, but you can choose your tomorrow. Really, you can.
Yeah, and I'm a big Jim Rohn fan. I don't know if you know Jim Rohn at all, but he was a businessman really in the 70s and 80s. I love his talks. But he always says it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you. And that's just really set with me. You know, I can't control what's going to happen to me next. Can't do it. I can control my reaction to that.
All right. I love it. I look forward to hearing what you got to say when you're on stage.
Appreciate it.
And I hope we get to talk again. Hopefully you'll pop by tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's been a slice. I will send people to your social media because you're going to put it on screen.
100%.
And yeah, good stuff. Thanks
awesome.
very much.
Appreciate your time. Be safe. Have a great rest of the day.